Daily Dispatch powered by HSBC. I'm Priya Seth, and joining me on this very interesting conversation is a panel of experts, and they're going to be talking about upskilling in the industry today. Joining me today is Abhimanyu Saxena, who's joining us from Scaler. We have Arjun Gupta from Courseplay and Sekhar Garisa from Monster. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today. I want to begin by talking a little bit about the whole upscaling space, because now people have started getting back to work. Work from home is no longer something that we've been adapting to and adopting across organizations. I wanted to understand the role of upskilling, because it seems to have emerged as a very important role these days. Let's begin with you, Sekhar.
Yeah, I guess, the only way to bring about the importance of upskilling is to say it's a condition of employment these days, and there are multiple reasons that are driving it. And the first and foremost one is that the requirement of skills for the business to serve their customers is continuously evolving. So you can no longer hire for a certain set of skills and hope that those set of skills will suffice whatever requirements the customer has over a period of time. That is rapidly changing. The second interesting angle is continuously upskilling the employees and giving them new challenges and areas to work on is one of the most important tools of retention and engaging the employees itself. So, one is a business requirement, two is to be able to engage and retain the employees itself. The third one is you can't keep going back to a fresh set of talent for every new requirement that you have when you have a vast internal pool that could be quickly upskilled and used. So even from a business efficiency, speed to market and ROI, it makes all the sense to kind of look at the existing pool of employees and continuously invest in upskilling. So I think from a business imperative, from retaining the employees, whichever way you look at it, you have to invest significantly and look at disruptive models of continuously upskilling your employees. There's just no other option away from it.
Absolutely. Arjun, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I obviously Shekhar's spot on with his remarks, and I think what I would add is I think the shift is also going from upskilling to also employee growth. So a lot of companies are also seeing that skilling is a very critical and a very large part of the of the employee's experience in the company. But they're also seeing that now they need to find ways to go above and beyond that. So how do we skill them using on-the-job learning methods? How do we upskill them with giving them access to coaches and mentors and leaders and managers in the company? So I think what organizations are also understanding is we can't just have a one track or a one size fits all approach with upskilling in the organization, and this has to sort of fit into every single aspect of the employee experience in the company. It can't just be online programs. It can't just be coaching. It has to sort of fit into the flow of work. And everything has to become a learning experience. Everything has to become a growth experience for the employee.
Right. Thanks for that. Abhimanyu, let me come to you to talk a little bit about what kind of programs can be introduced, which areas are seeing high focus when it comes to upskilling.
So on a very high level, taking a step back, Priya, there are two kinds of companies that we see, right? There are these large captive organizations with maybe, tens of thousands of engineers or in general, employees. On the other hand, we might have very young startups. Maybe, I just maybe want 5 or 10 engineers to come and transform my product. Now, of course, for both the organization, the kind of upskilling or reskilling needs they have are very different. Now, for a very young startup, probably my need would be that, say, I need to launch an iOS or Android app. I have hired a young engineer to help me with that. But internally, I might not have a very senior iOS architect who can mentor or guide this person. Right now, that not only often we look at upskilling or reskilling of the workforce only as an employee perk. However, I think in the leadership as well, suddenly there's a massive shift that is happening, that it is a must for the business. If I am a young startup and people in the company are not getting the right kind of mentorship from the best in the industry, it is going to impact my business negatively. If I have a junior iOS engineer building my iOS app, but there is no senior iOS architect mentoring him, there's no reason why this person would be able to create a world-class application which can compete with the big tech of the world. Now, big tech of the world, if I talk about the, the FANG or the large companies, of course, they already have a very strong internal ecosystem of mentoring and upskilling, right? But startups often lack on that. And hence, I think there is a very strong need for particularly the young startups, where they can provide very high quality mentorship and coaching access to their employees, not as an employee benefit program, but because if you want to remain relevant to the business, if you want to create high quality products, it is a must for you, right? It's kind of a business necessity. On the other hand, when I talk about the larger organizations, as Sekhar previously mentioned that, like maybe a couple of years down the line, you might have hired people for a specific skill, but that skill might not be relevant anymore. Now you have a large workforce of smart, hardworking people, but today you need them to be doing something that they are not trained for. So that reskilling, internal reskilling, so that you can repurpose them into high impact program. Of course, hiring externally is a very time and cost consuming way to fill the gaps. So for the larger organizations, the problem might be very different. So like these are the patterns that I have seen across young and older larger companies.
Right. Sekhar, you deal with so many companies, and on the platform, we've seen so many listings also coming up. Where have you seen more demand for upskilling? Are there specific sectors where you're seeing this kind of spurt in demand? And are there specific areas where you're seeing a spurt in demand?
I think the demand growth is fairly secular. I think while the demand in IT gets a lot of focus, airtime, mind space, it's safe to say that at this point in time, the demand is really secular across roles, across functions, across industries, right? And while even so far the conversation has focused primarily around IT skills, let me tell you, even in the other spaces, the roles are changing so drastically that the need for upskilling, for example, the kind of tech tools or processes HR would have used 3 years back to what they're using now are completely different. So even there's a need for upskilling HR to be able to use all the fantastic tools that people are building for hiring, engagement, productivity. Same for sales guys. We're talking about a number of tools coming in for salespersons to use. And how do you ensure that your sales team is moving up the curve? So what we are seeing is, at least from our perspective, when we look at hundreds of thousands of job postings, is there are certain new skills that are being added to every single role. And most of these have to deal with what we internally call as tech intensity. For every single role, we've seen that if you compare job postings now to job postings a few years back, the tech intensity has gone up. And what the tech intensity means different things for different roles. For HR person also, you can measure tech intensity of the role. For a salesperson, obviously for a technology resource, right? So from that perspective, the growth in demand is secular. There is an increase in the component of tech intensity, which is also driving the need for upskilling. The business models are getting disrupted, which is also resulting in people needing new skills of people to come in. And this is, again, plays out differently depending on the size of the organization. Like Abhimanyu said, tenure of the employee, there's a different kind of demand for people who are just joining the workforce to people who've spent years, and therefore they now need to be trained in different skills to be more breadth oriented in terms of what they deliver. So one interesting use case that's come to us, taking on what Abhimanyu also said, is when you hire people, right? You hire people for a particular skill, but that individual is more than that particular skill. So let's say I've hired 30 Java developers into an organization. I've hired them for Java development capabilities, but each of these 30 Java developers have different surround skills. So even the organization does not know tomorrow how to treat each of these 30 people differently, because their skilling curve could be very different. So we've had interesting use cases where an organization with 10,000 employees has actually come back and said, can you give me resumes of all 10,000 people who are currently working with me? Because you might have it, so that we know how to put them on the right skilling curve. What it just tells us is for every organization, this is one of their single biggest priority. And it cuts different ways in terms of what path they need to take to get to the right outcomes. The other interesting thing we've seen is, earlier people used to ask us for resumes of people. Now they're asking us a lot more about the competency and skills of people. And in some cases where we see great demand, customers have been coming and asking us, can you provide us on a source train hire model, which means you're skilling the people to an extent before you give us. So, all of it, if you look at it, these are all manifestations of the core requirement, which is that on a continuous basis, organizations feel that employees need to have more skills, different skills, and needs to add to their skills. And the other thing that we are noticing, Priya, is that earlier upskilling somehow seems to be an organizational priority once the candidate goes out of college. I think more and more we're seeing how candidates are making it their own priority, apart from whatever organization is doing. So I think it's kind of the candidate or the employee feels like upskilling themselves is their own priority as well, not just what organization is doing for them.
And that's exactly my next question, actually, Arjun. There's always been this whole debate about whether an employee should upskill himself or whether a company should invest in upskilling employees. So what kind of approach do you think will work for an organization then? Because, there are certain skills that they require. There are certain skills that employees identify and voluntarily want to, upskill themselves with. So what's your perspective on this?
Yeah. Wonderful question. And, I think that is super relevant, especially, at a time like this where, there's a lot of employee churn happening and employees sort of have a lot more control over their own personal destinies. And we've seen that in the skilling space, in the growth space as well. I think, as Sekhar said, an employee, they are more than the skills that they've been hired for. And they know best in terms of where they want their career to go, what kind of things they need to learn to enable that career growth. So, to answer your question, Priya, I think it's a mix. You will see employees take on personal training initiatives on, third-party sites like Coursera or Udemy. But then what we've also been seeing a lot is companies are embracing that and they're saying, okay, let's integrate with Coursera or Udemy. Let's set it up so that whatever learning they're doing on those third-party sites, we still capture that data and we're still able to see what kind of growth they're experiencing outside the office. And we can maybe make that somehow relevant in their roles in the company today. So I've seen a lot of organizations integrate with these third-party content hubs so that they can embrace that learning that's happening outside the office. At the same time, I think, the corporate world is able to offer a form of upskilling that an employee does not have access to on their own. So, this brings me back to my previous point about coaching and mentorship. They've got, and, as Abhimanyu said, companies have access to experts, managers, leaders, coaches, mentors that can actually spend time on a one-on-one basis, that can actually, guide and influence that learner or that employee in a way that you won't get on any kind of third-party portal. You won't necessarily get, even if you go for, these coaching classes, the kind of relevance, the kind of focus on the application of those technologies or those skills in the real world and making it relevant to your job. A company can do that in a really effective, a very efficient way. So we're seeing a lot of that as well, that, companies are focusing on that on-the-job piece. They're focusing on that human intervention on a very small, on a micro level. And then, that also works really well to help employees understand that they're special, that they're very much an important part of the company, make them feel less like a number. So I think, that makes a big impact in the overall employee experience as well.
Right. Thanks for that, Arjun. Abhimanyu, I want to talk a little bit about what kind of courses you see are picking up going forward, while Sekhar briefly alluded to how IT and tech-related courses are seeing traction. What kind of new courses need to be developed? What kind of trends are you seeing at an early stage that need to be caught on to?
Right. Again, I will break it down into two segments, right? So there are quite a few, and on a very broad level, what we have seen is that when we talk about employers in the service industry, then often the demand is more focused on a very specific framework, tool set, etc. Which, of course, that's an ongoing thing. As we all know, that tech moves very fast. Every couple of years, we will have new kind of frameworks, tool sets keep coming in. On the other hand, however, when we look at, let's say, given India is quickly growing as a IT hub where we are building in India for India, right? So there are a lot of companies which are not the offshore center of of IT and support and development, but they have entire end-to-end product thinking, design, development center just in India, right? Now these companies generally they do not bother that much about a specific skill, but they would look at your skills at a little more fundamental level. That how is your problem solving abilities? What is your design thinking? Do you have product thinking or not? And most importantly, can you learn new things very quickly on your own? Given some hints, some mentorship, are you able to pick up on new things very quickly or not, right? Now, what we have seen is that interestingly, because of course, our university curriculum have gotten quite outdated, and even actually apart from, let's say, top 1% engineering colleges or even management colleges, not a lot of colleges instill those fundamentals either. Hence, there's a lot of demand for people just to build a stronger problem solving skills and stronger design skills. Because even if you look at the interview patterns of the say top 10% employers in tech, they generally wouldn't be heavily indexed on a specific framework or language or technology. But they will be evaluating your problem solving and design skills in a lot more details. However, there is, of course, given India as an ecosystem has like contribution of the service sector and the startup and the top product MNCs, both are pretty equally heavy. Hence, there's demand for both. There is demand for people who want to just improve their design and problem solving skills. So hence, there are courses for that. And then there are courses which are very specific about learning a new framework, right? However, one important distinction is that learning new frameworks is an ever-going thing. For any individual's career growth, it's important if you can transition into a mindset where you learn to learn and you build better fundamentals instead of every couple of years trying to just learn one new framework through external help. So that is generally much better approach for a longer term upskilling.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your valuable perspectives on this topic. And audience, I'm sure, has gained a lot of insights from this conversation. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks so much for being part of the Daily Dispatch.